Welcome back to Stationeers, and it's time for another episode, I think, with some updates and probably some improvements, but don't worry, not to the airlock. The airlock, decided to give it a bit of a rest from all the electronics from you guys. Could complete it, but, you know, I think people are a bit tired of 3 episodes of pure electronics, so let's get on with something else. A couple of updates have been happening since I last looked at those, since I last did a video. A couple of changes. Let's look at the first one. So we've got these fill tanks, new models now. So as of course they've changed the model and all of my tanks are upside down. Yeah, there is that. But more importantly, even when they're the right way up, they have a data port now, so we can pull information out of them, like what's in these tanks, you know, pressure, temperature, etc. So that'll be maybe something cool for the future. There's also been, I think, a new fixed version of this tracking beacon, and I just want to see if it's available in here. There is kit beacon, and I'm hoping that that's it. It's called a fixed beacon, but I just want to see whether this is the trackable portable version, which is okay, or whether it's actually the full-size one. I'm assuming it's the full-size one. Yeah, that looks like a full-size one to me, and it takes power and has data. So, okay, I don't need data, I don't think. Did I put the... I put that... Oh. Sometimes... okay, it's play the game of which tool it is that removes this. There we go. Let's put this the right way around. Move it. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so if we go and grab the renaming tool from here. Labeler. And we just say, I don't know, home base. We can pop this out here. Now, it does take about 300 watts, so we can turn it on. And of course, we should be able to locate that using our usual device, the that I've not got on me. I put it away in a cupboard somewhere. It's probably in the other locker. Are you in here? Yeah. So we should be able to have a look at that, see where it is. There we are. So home base, and it should point towards always. It does. So now we have a permanent beacon. We don't necessarily need it on all the time, in particular that it does use up 300 watts, so we can flip it off. And anytime we go mining, we can put it back on, and then it'll pull power directly from our batteries, of course, as normal. So that's pretty good. So we've got the new gas storage, we've got the beacon, and I guess it's time to get on with what we want to do this episode. I want to have a look at the furnace briefly. Remember, a few episodes ago, down in my base, I built an automated furnace-ish, or rather it was an automated disposal system almost. This, you still have to input stuff manually and activate it manually, and then stuff pops out manually. But behind the scenes here, we have got this circuitry, which takes essentially a reading of the temperature of the furnace, essentially, which is this pipe here on this side of the digital valve. And as soon as it gets below this, which in this case is 800 Kelvin, it will then release into the system. What I think I want to do is have an extension to this to sort of basically automatically dump all the ingredients. Sounds sensible. And maybe open it automatically. And then, you know, we end up with essentially a completely automated furnace setup. So why don't we get on with building that a little bit. Let's have a look at first how we can put ingredients into a furnace. So I need to go make some ductwork. Okay, so chutes you've seen before. You've seen me build this before, which is an import to our automated furnace. Automated furnace for single ores, that is, rather than alloys. And you know what this does. You put stuff in it, you pull the handle, and it goes into your system. Over here, I've set up a simple version with 4 slots available. Same thing, except these have got windows so you can see inside them. Makes it much easier for you guys to see anyway, or at least you should be able to shortly. So let's give that a try. Let's pop in some iron. Okay, that's no good. What we ideally want is for it to queue back in here. We want our ingredients held in essentially a big hopper. So we're going to have to do a little bit of electronics, but don't worry, not too much, I promise. At least not for this bit. Okay, so we have a logic reader and a logic writer. What can we actually get out of this? So I've hooked up this outlet, chute outlet, and I've hooked up the chute bin, and then we can see what we can do with it. So logic reader, let's turn you on. And we're reading the chute outlet at the moment, which is the only one we need to actually look at. And we just want to see what it can do. So we have an open state, so we can open these doors at the bottom. That turns out not to be all that useful. You'll see because, well, at the moment, nothing's really happening. Or as soon as you put something in, it'll just go straight through and open. So we've not got any control over it. So the next one is lock. Lock is very useful. We'll come back to that in a second. Input quantity, input slot occupant. Okay, maybe useful, but I don't think I'm going to need them. I need to rely on... I'm trying to make something foolproof, but not completely foolproof. You need to be able to know what ingredients to put in this system. So, 3 stacks of iron and a stack of coal will do you just fine, or anything 3-to-1 ratio should do you just fine. So I don't need to worry about it, and it's less electronics if you just signpost what people need to input. So let's go back to lock for a second. Currently that's set to 0. All right, so we can use the writer instead and say logic memory, which is whatever's over here, and we can say we're going to set the chute outlet lock state. So if I then change this to 1, and then I put in some iron, you'll see it won't let it into this at all. So it's locked the entrance to it, which means I've not got exact ratios right here, but you get the idea. I can preload, hopefully. Interesting. Where's the 4th stack gone? Well, hopefully I get that back. Anyway, let's come back to that in a second. We should be able to just change this lock from 1, which is what it is right now, to 0. And things should start dropping out. There was all 4 in there. So you can stack up your ingredients just fine, which means we can then insert them, and the only thing we have to do is change a 1 to a 0. See what I mean about not much electronics? Now, aside from that, we're also going to need to do a couple of other things. Okay, so for the gas input, you can either come from one of your, your input tanks, or you can just use a mobile one like this. I'm just setting this up, hopefully to keep this nice and clear rather than set up it as a permanent part of the base. So you put in an input tank. You're going to want an input valve. Yep, so we're going to want a digital valve here, and then we're on a pressure regulator. And the pressure regulator, you don't actually have to touch that with electronics at all. Just set it once to whatever that particular mix is, and leave it. In this case, 150 kPa, we'll leave it at that. It starts at 50, I've just increased it to 150. Leave it on. So all you need to do is undo this valve, just like we used to do manually, and it's going to let some gas through. Gas is going to keep on going up to 150 kPa, and then once that happens, we can shut this valve off. Now, the reason why we have that is because as soon as we trigger the furnace, first of all, it's going to backflow back down here. It may not backflow, actually. I'm not sure if there's any internal control for that, but it's certainly going to increase in pressure and temperature, of course. However, once we decide to vent everything, and there's a passive vent up there, I'm not going to put this back into the filtration system, again for clarity, no actual other reason. Yeah, so once it fires, it's going to increase in pressure and temperature, and at some point it's going to drop steel at the bottom. At which point we're going to vent it using this other output vent, again a digital valve, and this is, sorry, did I say vent? I meant valve. We're going to vent it out this way, but as soon as that drops below this 150, it's getting towards vacuum again. If we don't cut this valve off, this is going to just start feeding gas in again. So you do need a valve to stop the rest of your system just continually feeding this furnace. And yeah, if you want it to continually fed, that's up to you. But in this case, I want a system where I push a button, or flick a switch in this particular case, and it's going to input all of my ingredients that I've loaded it with. It's going to fire the furnace up, input gas, fire the furnace up, and hopefully dump it all back out again. Okay, here we go. All this electronics is, oh well, all this electronics is only 5 chips. Everything from here to the left is just controlling that input valve. Okay, so what we're going to do is say, let's read the furnace pressure. So furnace pressure, let's compare it, furnace pressure less than, and then input gas pressure required. So in this case, 150 right here. And then we're going to multiply that, the furnace pressure low comparison. Let's just set this to multiply. So furnace pressure low is what we want. Multiply it by what you call start switch. On, currently it's 0. If I flip this over, it should change to 1. It does. And if this was 0, obviously that would also be 0. So there's no other problems there. And then we can take this math unit and let's actually, well, we can actually just set it here, I think. Logic math. It's currently set to 0. So if I push this switch now, the input goes on. Push this, the input goes off. But it's also checking the furnace pressure. So if this is too high, then it won't try and activate again. Only if it's low, i.e. vacuum or below 150, and I push this start switch, will it actually start pulling more gas into the chamber. Now, I wanted to point out a bug that I'm seeing with the furnace, and maybe you guys will know better, but when this is cooling down, and I'm not sure if you can see it now because it's almost gone to... yeah, it's almost gone. But as it's cooling down, the temperature and the pressure fluctuate. Now, this isn't just, you know, obviously the temperature's falling, so the pressure's falling. It oscillates between the two, and it spikes up. So every time it goes below a certain amount, the opposite one spikes up. But I'll show you in a second once I demonstrate it. You'll see what I'm actually getting at. That's nearly, yeah, you see there it's spiking up again. I think it's the same issue as the atmospheric issue at the top right of the screen that you used to get, where even at low pressures you were getting huge temperatures, and that sort of causes things to be unreliable. See, there it spikes again. There's no real reason for it. I wouldn't expect a spike like that unless something else is affecting this, and there isn't. It's not like this input valve's on, so we're not feeding any more gas in, we're not adding any more heat. And yes, so there's a bit of a buggy behaviour. I did spot it in the other one downstairs, but if any of you know any more, put it in the comments. Also about this chute system. Let me just turn you back off again. We've not got that under electronic control yet. If I put fuel in here and trigger this, it triggers the first one, but the second one doesn't get fed in because this furnace will only accept one thing at once. So I guess what I could do is pass it through another section of chute and use this as a kind of switch at the top, and then the other chutes will just feed in as they can, maybe. I'm not sure of any better way of doing this, because as soon as I open that lock, it's going to feed all of this through, and it feeds the first item in. The second item doesn't get fed in. You'll see in a second. In fact, let me just demonstrate this so you can see what's going on. Again, this may be intended behavior, so I'm not going to complain about it, but it is a little bit odd. Let me just grab 1, 2, 3 of you as well. And let's show you the next bit of electronics, shall we? So this bit of electronics, it lets us do the triggering of the entire system. So first of all we're going to do, what we could do is take this and put a NOT gate in, as I've shown you previously with electronics. I've put it as a separate comparison instead of a NOT gate. In fact, let me explain it first. So I've got a compare unit just like the one here, but this is now saying furnace pressure greater than this logic memory, so 149.9. This one is 150, so this one's doing less than 150, in which case it's safe along with the switch to turn on the input valve. This one is doing greater than 149.9. I've kept them separate, not just a NOT, i.e. to flip things around, because if it passes a certain value, I may want it to cut off something or start something at a different point, rather than just the opposite of whatever this is, right, which is what a NOT gate would give us. So I've just got a, is it greater than 149.9? If it is, then we're going to take, is it this one? Yeah, pressure ready. And we're going to go to the furnace and activate it. And we're also going to go to the chute outlet and control the lock. So this is currently 1 because we're reading furnace pressure low, which isn't this one, it's this one over here. So it's currently locked because the furnace pressure is too low, but as soon as it gets above 150, it will unlock this, i.e. it will dump all the ingredients. This one activates the furnace. So whenever it hits 150 or thereabouts, it will activate the furnace and dump the ingredients in. Seems simple, right? Let's show you what happens. So let's put the coal in first, and let's put that up there, and put the iron in. So you'll see them popping up there, and you can see there's nothing in the furnace. We're at 0, and we're ready to go. So if I go and push this switch, see that's lit up. It's going to get to a certain pressure. It's pressurizing right now. When it hits 150, have I run out of pressure in the canister? I have. 1 second. Let's go and get a little bit more fuel. It's a disadvantage of building in a temporary setup. That'll do. Go over here. Pop you back in. So, 138, 142, 150, and boom, now it should activate. It cuts off this, and then it tries to dump in the ingredients. However, it's only dumped in the coal. So let me turn you off again, just so it doesn't try and do anything else. If I pop this in, what you'll see happen is that it'll go through again, hopefully, yeah, and if I pull the handle, that pops steel. Where's the other iron ore? Sometimes it pops out the top, sometimes not. Not sure what's happening. I think it's a buggy behaviour. So I'm going to leave that this episode. If it's not a buggy behaviour, tell me in the comments. If you've tried that before, do let me know. What I was going to do is maybe put another section of chute here and see how that goes. But for now, we've got a control system for getting this in. The last bit, all we need to do once we sort out, oh well, I'll sort out the buggy behaviour later. All we need to do now is just automatically vent. Now that's a system I've done before. All that we need to do in this particular case is watch for this. You'll see, obviously, it's quite high pressure, it's quite high temperature, and it's now pretty much safe because as soon as I do this, push this button, I'll be watching for steel to pop at the bottom, which is the next thing we need to look at which point we can then, trigger this valve. So what we could do is, I guess we could open the mold. If there's an export slot occupant, assuming that something in the furnace that hasn't been processed yet is counted as an export slot occupant, and then based on that, we could also, I guess, trigger this, which will let all the gas out at the same time. Let's give that a try. Okay, so let's see if it's the export slot occupant. I've got a reader here that reads in the furnace's export slot occupant and a writer which reads this and then writes to the furnace to say open. So let's give this a go. I've put some some iron. I'm going to need to get some more iron to actually feed into this thing. Let me just split one off. There we go. Oh, whoops, too many. I did actually put some in at the wrong time, so there is some reagent stuck in that actual corner, so don't be surprised if you see that. It's nothing I'm surprised by anyway. Let's put you over here. Alright, let's start it up again. We're going to need to put in the coal. And the iron. Yeah, still no content. So let's start her up again, shall we? So that should be pressurizing. Should be hitting 150. Should start up, hopefully. There it goes. And there's the reagent mix. And unfortunately it's forgotten the steel. So let's go and grab the steel. There is just an issue with that, so once we sort that out we should be okay. Let's just grab 1, 2, 3. Put you in there. We'll produce 4 grams of ingot steel, but doesn't look like export slot occupant is actually going to work. No, there isn't an export slot occupant. So what else can we actually do? Wait a second. Pressure? If you read the pressure and we can tell it to open based on pressure. So it is just, yeah, so open will work. We just need something to tell us when it's ready to work, which is interesting. Lock, no. Setting, no. Reagents? Maybe. We could try reagents. Although I would expect that to be, you know, the input stuff, but we'll see. Okay, just to get rid of the chute bug, or whatever it is, I've removed it from the top. There doesn't seem to be any indication whether something is ready to be made. And that's really annoying. We do, however, or we can, however, get an indication of the gases inside. Let me just start removing it. So for this one, I've set ready to export this reader as looking at the furnace ratio of pollutant. And you'll see it's currently 0. But when I didn't have this pressurized, this was like 0.2. You see, it's decreasing now. We can have a look at other things as well. Ratio of volatiles. Okay. Ratio of water. Let's go back through them. There's a ratio of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Obviously, you can see carbon dioxide is quite high. We could look for one of those things, and when that's actually quite high, we could then use this logic writer to do the open state for the furnace. So when the ratio of, let's say, pollutant, because that's what happens when you turn the furnace on, is high, then we can press the open mold thing, which will drop it through the bottom. So let's see if that actually works. Okay, let's give this a try. It won't be able to feed anything in automatically, of course, because I've still got that buggy behavior, but let's push the start switch. It's going to feed stuff in, and then once it gets to that, it's going to start the furnace. So I'm going to put in this stuff into the top. Okay, and it's made steel. As quickly as that. Now, of course, it's still going to stay hot at the moment. And I guess what we're going to need to do then, and I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you guys actually, because it's not terribly hard, and if you have any problems with it, I'll cover it in the next episode. But basically all you need to do is you need to take this, and you want to see whether, let's say, the temperature is high or something along those lines, and you need to combine that with something else, and you need to then open the output valve, okay, to let everything through. So you could use the same thing here. If the pollutant is high, it's 1, then you could open the output valve. But as soon as that actually changes to low, i.e. below 0.2 is what I've set it to at, that will close the output valve. So you're going to want to have to combine that with something else, or you can just do something like, if this is 1, then you can read the pressure and then use the pressure and then leave that open until the pressure is 0. I'll leave that for your exercise. Obviously come back to me if you want to suggest anything specific, but it's relatively straightforward, nothing compared to the rest of it. I will do a bit of research on this chute and see everything works, but we now have a furnace, assuming we fix this bit, will make us automatic steel. We just put the ingredients in, we hit this switch, it will pressurize, ignite, convert, and eject, and we can just put, you know, a chute leading out from this to wherever we want, like downstairs. So there's not terribly all that much electronics, certainly not by comparison to the airlock, but hopefully you find this enjoyable. If so, give it a thumbs up, and we'll see where we go from here. I may do a bit of more corrections next episode, depending on what I find out from the research. I hope there's something simple for that. I could be doing something stupid, and yeah, we'll see you next time. So, thanks for watching. Feel free to share and subscribe, etc. if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.